the silence of the Church of England on some of our cases has been remarkable. And speaking of the Church of England, our next case is our next victory, Nigel and Sally Rowe, who you talked about earlier on, delivering a petition earlier this week. What happened there in September, Andrea?
Well, I mean, this has been a case. I mean, many of our cases, and I want to thank all of those that are listening and watching. I just want to thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying with us day in, day out, year in, year out. Because the case of Nigel and Sally Rowe, it's taken 5 years. They have become part of the Christian Concern family. That's the truth. They were with us, as I say, this week. But 5 years ago, before we had all the controversy around mermaids, before we had all the noise in the space around transgenderism and the harm, they saw what it was doing in their local school. Their children became upset by it. It was actually in a Church of England school. They raised an issue because they were concerned not just for their children, but for all of the children in this little school in the Isle of Wight. All of the school's policies, the sporting policies, the toileting policies were being changed in order to accommodate 1 and then 2 and then 3 children. So it's very confusing. When asked for support by the Church of England Diocesan Education,
about 6-year-olds as well, Andrea.
Yes,
to remind
primary
everyone.
school children.
6-year-olds who are being allowed to identify as the opposite gender when they felt suit, and then all the other children in the class were told, you must call him, her, on those days when they identify the opposite gender.
Yes. And then, of course, so then the idea then that the letter that came back to them was that unless they could accept that the 6-year-old or the 8-year-old was in the acquired gender, in the so-called acquired gender, then they were transphobic, that they were bigoted and transphobic. And again, the Church of England did nothing to assist or to back them up.
Well, they did the opposite. They backed up the school. They did the opposite. They came against them.
And Nigel Genders, who's the head of the education on a national level, he too did that. And so what you have is and during prior to this case, we'd also had the case of John Parker, who'd sought to again expose mermaids' involvement in a school.
Well, he was later, wasn't he? He was 2018, I think.
Oh, 2018. Sometimes this is the thing. So he was a little bit. So he was later. So Nigel and Sally, you're right, were the very first ones. Again, and that was under Stephen Cottrell, now the Archbishop of York. He didn't support them. The Archbishop of Canterbury hasn't supported these parents and other parents that have stood with them. So, but quite extraordinarily, by sheer persistence, 5 years on, having got together, I believe, the most brilliant evidence, the most brilliant peer-reviewed evidence from experts across the world. It's a report that runs to thousands of pages, which brings together scientific studies, social science studies, which show outcomes on children and on adolescents if they are affirmed in the wrong gender. And those outcomes are very poor. So it's really poor social practice to promote a policy where our children are harmed. I mean, we know this biblically anyway, but all the social science proves it. And we got a promise from the government to review their guidance.
And you've got this amazing situation where the government has moved on it and has recognised these things, even though back in 2016, then people were sort of laughing at the Rows or us, like, oh, why are you so hung up about a little boy dressing up in a skirt?
Well, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury actually said, I remember the headline. I mean, Justin Welby actually said during that time, there's no harm in the dressing up box, but this is not dressing up box stuff.
No, not at all.
This is really deep. This is heaping trauma upon trauma. This is, sadly, affirming a little child that
It's actually child abuse. It's actually child abuse. To say you can change gender, you say you're born in the wrong body, it's child abuse.
And you've now got the Church of England's guidance, Following All God's Children, which we were delivering this petition about on Monday, still in the same place. The government's moved. Government started recognising some of these things.
Yeah.
The wider society is recognising it. Mermaids is under all kinds of problems, and the Church of England still, it's all fine. Nothing to see here.
And to be clear, just for everyone listening, that at the Valuing All God's Children guidance for Church of England schools, including primary schools, does basically say or endorse affirming children in an acquired gender. And it's a real problem, and it's been used against Christians like Nigel and Sally Rowe and many other Christian teachers and parents as well, saying the Church of England says this is fine, we should be doing this. So it's a real menace.
It's raised as a matter of course. That guidance and the Church of England stand is raised as a matter of course, not just in the high-profile cases, but continually in the cases that we deal with that are under the radar in schools, to show where the Church of England is, to undermine true biblical teaching, to undermine parents that truly want the protection of their children. So actually, we need to keep on writing to our bishops on this. We need to keep on writing to Nigel Genders on this, who heads up education at the Church of England. We need to keep on doing it. And I see that Pete Benjamin is commenting, and he's part of our Christian Concern family. I mean, do go and look at his video. We've got a video that shows Pete's story of someone who lived out in the opposite sex for a number of years. He thought that it would provide him with the in terms of living out and in the opposite sex. He thought that it would make all his problems, his issues, go away, and in fact, it just made it worse.
But all his story also goes back to his childhood, doesn't it? And the things that happened in his childhood in terms of dressing up and these sorts of issues. So,
and Pete will be the first to say that the traumatizing thing is it's even things like pantomime dames and drag queens, this kind of thing. Yeah. And of course, we've got drag queens in our libraries and drag queens in our schools. Pastors out, drag queens in.
But we give thanks for the again to God that actually some real movement has happened in this.
Real movement has happened. It was a victory for Nigel and Sally Rowe. The government are going back to the drawing board on this. They're going to review and change their guidance as a result of Nigel and Sally's stand. And what we are, again, we want to make Jesus famous in schools. In Church of England schools, we want his name made known. In our schools, in our state schools, we want to reinstate assembly, where Jesus Christ is known. We want Christian schools to be raised up and down the country, where we will see his name made known. We want to see him at the heart of society once more.
Absolutely. And we're obviously very involved in Christian education with Steve Bigu, who heads up that work for us, really helping Christian schools and Christians within education to make a difference where they are.